On day 10 of our trip, we left Bremer Bay and headed to Denmark. We're not sure why our camera went a bit weird at this stage, because all the orange stripes on Philip's jacket and taillights, etc., had all moved off center. Whether or not it had something to do with the fact that it was overcast that day, or just because it was a cheap camera, we weren't sure. We had made sure there wasn't any dirt on the lens, and it had not got wet at all up to this point. However, that was all about to change later on in the day. Nevertheless, the camera did seem to sort itself out by the next day, despite getting wet.
Our first stop was the general store in Bremer Bay to put in fuel. We found the system there very unusual. We had to get one of the locals to explain to us how it actually works. There was a machine on the wall. You had to swipe your bank card and enter an amount for the fuel you want. Then fill up and hopefully only get charged for the amount of fuel you actually put in, as we'd overestimated how much it would cost for both our bikes. Well, I think we were only charged for the fuel we put in, so all good.
After filling up our bikes, we headed out of Bremer Bay, having to make a brief stop to set the GPS, which Philip had forgotten to do before we left. There wasn't much traffic on the road, with it being a Sunday morning, but we did see a few caravans and a couple of road trains and the occasional camper van. We once again opted for the quieter roads, but no sooner had we turned off from the main road than the clouds started looking really heavy. We'd been on the road for nearly 2 hours at this point, so it felt like we needed a bit of a break. We found a spot next to an electrical substation where we could pull off and put on our waterproof pants over our jeans, and then also use the bush toilet.
I learned my lesson about putting on rain pants when we did a trial run a few weekends back. Then I waited till it was actually raining before we stopped, so I can put on my rain pants. Then I discovered how difficult it is to get them over boots, so I had to sit on the side of the road in the rain, take my boots off, put the pants on, and by that time I was already wet in any case. Edna already had hers on, so she just sat on her bike laughing at me as she put hers on when we left home. This time I made sure I put them on before it started raining.
No sooner were we back on the road again and it started bucketing down, and it rained on and off for the rest of the afternoon. We saw a few strange sights along this route. The first being this weird big-wheeled vehicle traveling towards us. It was so high off the ground, we thought we might even have been able to drive straight through underneath it. They seem to have had quite a bit of rain in this general area, because there was a lot of water next to the road in various places. The next weird thing we saw was this huge oversized water tank traveling down the road, obviously being transported by a farmer. We were stuck behind it for a while, but when the way was clear, he pulled over to the side of the road, allowing us to overtake. We pulled off the road just past Mount Barker because by this stage we were starting to get really cold. As usual, I took a couple of photos while Philip had a swig out his water bottle. I made a quick video call to my daughter back home. We zipped up the vents in each other's jackets and then left for Denmark. But at this point our camera stopped recording because it only has a 2-hour battery life and had already been going for close to 3 hours. We really couldn't complain about the weather though, as up to this stage we hadn't had any rain and we'd had near perfect weather, so yeah, definitely couldn't complain.
We arrived in Denmark cold and hungry, so after checking into our B&B, which was run by a very hospitable German lady, we went down to the local tavern for a beer and something to eat. We sat on the patio next to a gas heater and we each had a bowl of hot soup with bread to warm us, and then we shared a pizza. We took the leftovers home and left it in the fridge overnight so we could take it with for dinner the next day at the Karri Valley.
We had a good night's rest at the B&B, and after a huge German breakfast we left for the Karri Valley. I took a bit of a nosedive in the mud at this resting stop on the side of the road. My bike had stalled while I was trying to do a U-turn, so I fell off and hurt my left knee and my right pinky a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. This very concerned motorist stopped and wanted me to go for x-rays, but I just needed a bit of a break and then we carried on. We didn't do any sightseeing while we were in Denmark for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we'd visited there once before, and secondly, because it rained the whole time we were there. So it was really just an overnight stop to break up the trip to the Karri Valley.
At this point the GPS seemed to get lost and we were extremely cold and starting to get really wet. This is when we realized that even though our jackets and boots are relatively waterproof, they're not meant for extended riding in heavy rain. Edna did not take a spare pair of gloves and only had her summer gloves which were saturated and her hands were ice cold. I gave her my spare pair of gloves which were also wet by this stage. My left boot was letting in water and rain was running down my sleeves and also into my jacket from the top.
We eventually had to stop and ask for directions from some workmen on the side of the road, as we thought we should almost be there according to the GPS, only to find out we still had another half an hour of riding. It was so disheartening. We should have actually been on the other side of the little town of Pemberton, so we'd come in from the wrong side. We found it quite strange that such a well-known tourist attraction wasn't signposted anywhere along the way, and the GPS didn't really seem to know exactly where it was. So we had to keep stopping to check the directions on the phone and compare it to the GPS occasionally.
By the time we got to the Karri Valley Resort, we were tired, hungry, cold, wet and miserable, probably looking like two drowned rats. We must have made quite an impression on the lady at reception when we checked in, as she knew exactly who we were the next time we called in, and when we checked out, each time commenting about the improved weather conditions.
The roads up to the chalet were very steep with very sharp turns, and it turns out the lady at the reception was not very good at giving directions to get to our particular chalet. So I got most of the way up and then finally just lost my nerve, especially after having taken a tumble earlier. So I just stopped on the side of the road and got Philip to take my bike up the last little bit to the chalet. So this is the Karri Valley Resort. We were staying for 3 nights. Had to drive in the cold, wet rain to get here, but looks like it might be worth it. Got a nice fireplace. Whoops. The kitchen. All our stuff. Actually got 2 bedrooms, but this was all we could book, so actually short notice. The bathroom. And this is the second bedroom. And then a nice fireplace. Look at that. Can't wait to light the fire. Here's the main bedroom. When I made the booking at the resort, I had organized a bottle of red wine and a platter of cheese and bread with salad and olives, etc., to be in our chalet when we arrived, and I didn't tell Philip about it, so it was a nice little surprise for him, but little realizing at the time just how welcome it would turn out to be after such a cold, long, hard ride. So after a nice hot shower and putting on warm, dry clothes, we sat down to a late lunch with a glass of wine in front of the roaring fire and finally started to relax and feel human again.